In this video, we are going to go through some of the common Java testing frameworks. So it's quite a diverse landscape. I'm going to give you highlights. I'm not going to go into every one by any means. There's quite a diversity out there. I'm going to hit the big ones and look at a lot of the ones we'll be looking at inside this course. JUnit. This is the big guy on the block. This is by far the most popular testing framework for Java. Currently, JUnit 4 is very widely used. JUnit 5 came out in September of 2017. That is about a year ago from the time that I'm recording this, but it is rapidly gaining popularity. Now, I expect industry-wise, we are going to see JUnit 5 take over. It's just the natural progression. Java developers tend to be conservative. They don't always jump on the new thing right away. I'm starting to see JUnit 5 pop up more and more, but there is a ton of JUnit 4 out there still. I'm going to focus the course primarily on JUnit 5. I am going to give a section on migrating from 4 to 5 because you can take JUnit 4 tests and run them under JUnit 5. I'm not going to put a lot of time into JUnit 4 in this course. We'll cover it and show you migration, but not dive into it. JUnit 5 is really where the industry is going and will continue to go. Another very popular testing framework is TestNG. Cedric Bust, I think that's his name, or saying his name properly. If not, please forgive me. In 2004, he created TestNG as an alternative to JUnit. Back in 2004, I liked TestNG. JUnit 3 as the major release at that point in time, if my memory serves me correctly. He wanted to just address some deficiency in JUnit. It wasn't perfect. It was very popular, but the whole space was evolving quite rapidly. Since 2004, I mean, that's like forever ago when it comes to technology, the functionality have evolved very close. TestNG is still very popular. It has a smaller base. At this point, I am not going to cover it in the course. If there's demand, maybe I will add it at a future date, but currently I'm not planning on it. JUnit just completely dominates. Chances are, if you're going out to an employer, probably going to be using JUnit. So next up is Spock. I am actually a big fan of Spock. I really like that. This testing framework, it is written in Groovy. You write your test in Groovy, but the author of it specifically designed it to test Java. So it's great for testing Groovy as well, don't get me wrong. The downside is you do need to know Groovy. It does follow behavior-driven development. What I like about Spock, it has its own mocking framework built in. And at Spring 1, I'm pretty sure it's 2013, I did a speech on using Spock along with Spring MVC Test. So there's a lot of pure JUnit stuff with Spring MVC Test, but not a lot of Spock. And Spock brings a number of nice advantages to the table where you can use mocks right within the framework. And Spock is also very popular in shops where Groovy is used. Different Java shops they can be a little flaky. They might not like Groovy, so you might not be able to use Spock. I am a fan of Spock, so I do plan on adding Spock content to this course. Cucumber. This is also a BDD testing framework. Now, at this time, it is available for Java, JavaScript, and Ruby. It is very popular in the Ruby community. It is gaining popularity in the Java community. It uses Gherkin syntax. This is a very natural English-like syntax where you describe the what and not the how. It's kind of funny. You make like little sentences of how you want things to behave. I think there's a bit of a learning curve to it. I've used Cucumber. The Ruby guys call them Cukes for the test. It is very popular in the Ruby community. It is starting to pick up in the Java community. It does have a good use case where you can get a very strong technical business analyst writing tests in this natural-like syntax. So that there is a nice use case for it, but to get it established on a larger project, there's going to be a little learning curve there. At this time, I'm not going to cover Cucumber in this course. Mockito. So Mockito is a mocking framework for testing. I want to point out that it only does the mocks. Right? So you need to use a test framework to work with it, like JUnit or TestNG. Now, it is very, very popular. It is a top 10 Java library, very popular for testing Spring applications. So if you've taken my Spring 5 course, and you've definitely seen some Mockito, this is definitely going to be covered in the course. I like Mockito. I used to hate it because its API was a little funky, but it has definitely cleaned that up and evolved nicely. So earlier versions, I didn't care for too much. I thought it was just too confusing to use. Later versions, it's evolved and is much, much nicer, and we'll definitely be covering that. I mentioned this earlier because we are focusing on testing Spring MVC Test. This is a testing module found within Spring Framework. Very, very versatile. It is for testing Spring MVC controllers. It provides a mock servlet environment. So if you think about it, servlets are very tricky little guys to test. And if you look at the Spring MVC stuff, there's a lot of that's happening within the framework where you want to be testing the request as far as like the HTTP mapping, the content type mappings, the JSON that's being returned. So that there's a lot that you need to be testing. MVC Test is specifically for that. Again, it's kind of like a mocking framework for controllers as a rough way of looking at it, but it also needs to be used with a testing framework such as JUnit, TestNG, or Spock, as I demonstrated at Spring 1 a few years ago. And we will definitely be covering this. Rest assured. This is a Java framework for testing RESTful web services. This is a very powerful DSL for testing RESTful interfaces. This is a syntax to its own. It can optionally be used with Spring Mock MVC or actually deployed running web server to actually invoke the full stack. The test, you write it in a DSL that's specific to Rest Assured, and they do follow a BDD syntax. Very, very popular, very good. Something that I do want to use more, maybe including in the class. There's a lot. I hesitate. We'll see how much I add into this course. Rest Assured is excellent. It's probably could be a course on its own. It's a fairly large thing. And there's also a good bit of overlap with the capabilities of Spring Mock MVC. So we'll see if I actually add it. We'll see on student demand. We'll see on that one. Selenium. This is web browser automation. This allows you to write functional tests against web applications. So it is actually going to exercise your web application from a browser. And this allows you to control the browser. Point about Selenium is it really gives you the levers to control the browser and get information from the browser and what's being displayed to the browser. You do need to use a testing framework with this, such as JUnit TestNG. Now, there is a very groovy way to do that with Selenium. Jeb. I'm a big fan of Jeb. This basically takes Selenium and puts a groovy wrapper around it, get a really nice DSL, and then you have, they call it jQuery-ish page element selectors. I worked at a very large retailer, and we had a fairly large application, web application, and we did a lot of Jeb tests with Spock. So we had a lot of test coverage written for the web application using Jeb, i.e. Selenium, and Spock. So this is a very versatile, really nice tool. So if you are in needing of testing a web application, Jeb and Spock, I definitely give them a thumbs up. I still like that stack quite a bit, even though it's been a few years since I worked with it. Test containers. This is something I am actually personally starting to test with. It is a framework for JUnit that allows you to launch Docker containers from your JUnit test. It allows you to start up a database so you can bring up like MySQL and a Docker container while your test is running and point your test at that. You can also use it for Selenium testing, bring up a container, a Docker container with that. So this is something I hope to add to the course. No promises on that. I do want to get to it. We'll see how big this course gets. Test containers is an area that I want to explore. As you know, or as you may know, I should say, I do have a Docker for Java developers course. Test containers would be a natural fit for that course. And testing, it's kind of we'll see, maybe I'll add it to both. But it is a technology that I personally need to get up to speed on. I've kicked the tires on it. I really like it. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Docker. And if you have a need for test containers within a JUnit test, it's definitely a technology I highly recommend checking out.